Hello again, Year 12. This is your analysis video for Preludes, the second of our Eliot poems for Module B. Just like with the love song video, please, if you haven't read all of Preludes yet yourself, pause the video, go and read the poem in full before you watch this deconstruction. Make sure that you are thinking about what I'm saying rather than just copying down the annotations. And if you notice anything that I haven't said that you find interesting or that you have a question about, make sure you note it down so you can discuss it in your class. All right, so Preludes was written in 1917, a couple of years after Love Song, but there are quite a few common ideas across the two poems. So Preludes is really a critique or criticism by Eliot of the monotonous routine of modern urban life. Remember, this was something that Eliot was really concerned about, the impact of monotony and routine on individuals' identity and their souls and their spirituality. So within Preludes, there's a real sense of stagnation and a lack of progress, and a deconstruction of the identity of the individual. So you notice that all the people that are mentioned in Preludes are kind of fragmented, or they don't seem to have their own or they like uniform, kind of fragmented or uniform. They don't have their own identities. All right, so the style is quite different to Love Song. So you'll notice it's much shorter, obviously. And this is not a dramatic monologue. So remember, Love Song was a dramatic monologue. Preludes is different. We've got a poem broken into 4 irregular stanzas. And they are 4 vignettes of human experience within a modern city. So a vignette is a brief, evocative description, account, or episode. So we get 4 of these little descriptions of moments within the city, and they're not necessarily connected. Okay, so they're just like 4 little snapshots of life within the city, only connected by the passage of time. So again, similarly to Love Song, we've got another ironic title. Remember, that's something that we're going to see across a lot of Eliot's poems. So a prelude is a musical term. It's a short musical form that precedes the main piece of music. So it's kind of like an introduction. However, that's ironic within our poem because there is no main event. All we get is kind of the prelude. Nothing really happens, okay? So our poem is not preceding anything, which is the irony. All right, I'm going to go through each of the preludes, each of the vignettes, one by one, and we will just discuss some of the main techniques and stylistic features within each. So this is 1. The winter evening settles down with smell of steaks in passageways, 6 o'clock. The burnt out ends of smoky days, and now a gusty shower wraps the grimy scraps or withered leaves about your feet, and newspapers from vacant lots. The showers beat on broken blinds and chimney pots, and at the corner of the street a lonely cab horse steams and stamps, and then the lighting of the lamps. So the setting that is established in this opening is obviously an urban street, so a street in a modern city, and it is evening, so it is 6 o'clock in the evening. So from the very first line, we get the personification of the environment, and that kind of continues throughout the stanza. So we've got the winter evening settling down, a gusty showers wrapping, the showers are beating, okay? So the environment is active, compared to the people who seem to be absent from this picture, except for a mention of their feet. Okay, active environment, passive people. We've got this kind of lexical chain of adjectives that are connected by, you know, meanings that are quite bleak and dirty and isolating. So it's the burnt out, smoky, gusty, grimy, scraps, withered, vacant, broken, lonely. Okay, so this is a really vivid image of a lifeless, broken, bleak, decaying city. Not a pleasant place to be. We got the interesting use of second person when it says of withered leaves about your feet. And that's really positioning the reader as the modern man or the modern individual that's inhabiting this city. So we are kind of put in the position of having to imagine ourselves within this environment, which is not very pleasant. It's quite confronting. And then we have the end, which is this line that's by itself, the lighting of the lamps. So lamp lighting at the time would have been this ritualistic action that ended each day. Okay, so we have this sense of routine being established. All of this is going on, and then we light the lamps, and the same thing happens over and over each day. All right, second stanza. Prelude. The morning comes to consciousness of faint stale smells of beer from the sawdust trampled street with all its muddy feet that press to early coffee stands. With the other masquerades that time resumes, one thinks of all the hands that are raising dingy shades in 1,000 furnished rooms. Okay, so time has passed. We're now in the next morning. So we've got this ticking over of time, the passage of time. And again, we've got the environment still personified. So we had the morning in the first vignette, and then the evening in the first vignette, and the morning in this vignette. I think that phrase, the morning comes to consciousness, again, is quite like a passive action. It's like the morning's being forced into consciousness rather than wanting to be awake. I think it's quite an interesting way of saying that. We've got the olfactory imagery of the faint, stale smells of beer. Again, this is like a sordid, dirty, morally corrupt place. And then, just like in Love Song, we also have synecdoche throughout this entire poem. So we've got the muddy feet. So individuals are not described as being individuals or whole people here. They're just described as being their feet. So quite fragmented. And what are the feet doing? They're pressing to early coffee stands. So again, this is a ritualistic action. This is something that you would do every morning. Every morning you would go and you would get your coffee. And all of the feet are doing that, right? There's no individuality with the people in the city. There's this uniformity that everyone is going through the same motions. Their feet are muddy, they're going to the coffee stand, and that's how they start every day. With the other masquerades that time resumes, so masquerades, again, we're getting a connection to Love Song here with preparing a face to meet the faces that you meet. Again, it's an image of the people performing. So they're conforming maybe mindlessly to social expectations. So this is just a performance of the day that doesn't have any real meaning. And beyond that, they're not even in control, it seems, of the masquerades. Who's resuming the masquerades? Time is. So we have a personification of time, and it's time that is in control of the people. Okay, it's morning, you go get your coffee, you do your performance of the day. Okay, it's time that is in control of the people rather than themselves in control of their own lives. Again, we've got the synecdoche with the hands, and then what are the hands doing? They're raising dingy shades in 1,000 furnished rooms. Another image of uniformity. All the hands are doing the same thing in 1,000 different rooms. There's no individual action or uniqueness in the people. There's just this meaningless following of routine. All right, third vignette. You tossed a blanket from the bed, you lay upon your back and waited. You dozed and watched the night revealing the 1,000 sordid images of which your soul was constituted. They flickered against the ceiling. And when all the world came back and the light crept up between the shutters and you heard the sparrows in the gutters, you had such a vision of the street as the street hardly understands. Sitting along the bed's edge where you curled the papers from your hair or clasped the yellow soles of feet in the palms of both soiled hands. Okay, so we've got a bit of a shift now. So there's a shift to second person. We had that little moment of second person in the first vignette, but this is a sustained use of second person. So again, we are having to imagine that we are the person in that's doing these actions. So again, it's Eliot very effectively putting us right in the action and making us align with this person. Time's passed again, so it seems like it maybe is like the early hours of the morning. The person can't sleep. They're kind of suffering from this anxiety or insomnia or something like that in the early hours or the middle of the night or something like that. And then by the end, they're getting up, so we assume that it's maybe morning. So again, we have this collection of verbs: lay, waited, dozed, watched, very passive. Okay, the person is not acting. Okay, they're just lying there, kind of dozing off, watching. There's not a lot of action happening. And what are they watching? We get this interesting metaphor that they're watching the night reveal the 1,000 sordid images of which your soul was constituted. So it seems like the person's soul is a reflection of the urban environment that we've had established in the first two vignettes. So that word sordid kind of means dirty, squalid, morally distasteful. So just like that is how Eliot describes the external world, the environment, that is also reflected in the actual soul of the person. And then we have day breaking, the world's coming back and the light's creeping in. And then what does the person hear? They hear sparrows in the gutters. Okay. So usually we would think of sparrows probably in a positive light, but these sparrows are in the gutters. So we have this kind of corruption of the natural world. We had the horse steaming and stamping, and now we have the sparrows. So not a lot of natural images, but when we do get these moments, they're kind of juxtaposed with these negative things like being in the gutters. Okay, so the person seems to wake up, and then you had such a vision of the street as the street hardly understands. Now, I think this is a pretty ambiguous couple of lines, and I'll definitely be interested to know what you guys think Eliot is trying to say here. What is this vision that the person is having that the street doesn't really understand? I think that the connotations of having a vision is, kind of seeing clearly, understanding, maybe seeing the future, having a vision. So to me, this is like almost a moment of epiphany right? They're having a vision, they're having a moment. Maybe there's some insight, they're seeing their environment clearly or something like that. But then it's just not sustained. It's like this little moment, but then they go back to, you know, curling the papers from their hair, and it's just nothing really happens from that. And I think we're getting, again, it gives me the vibes of Prufrock's overwhelming question, right? He gets close, he almost asks, he almost gets there, but then we get this kind of letdown, okay? And again, this is coming back to this idea that Eliot, he was critical of the lack of meaning he saw in the modern world, but he wasn't entirely pessimistic. He thought people did have a desire for meaning and that meaning was possible, and we see that echoed in these little moments throughout his poems. But again, it doesn't last long, because now we move straight back to the person being described with these really negative connotations and descriptions, the yellow soles of their feet, soiled hands. Even that soiled hands has quite like connotations of sin, guilt, something like that. Okay. All right, and moving on to the final vignette. 4. His soul stretched tight across the skies that fade behind a city block, or trampled with insistent feet at 4 and 5 and 6 o'clock, and short square fingers stuffing pipes and evening newspapers, and eyes assured of certain certainties, the conscience of a blackened street, impatient to assume the world. I am moved by fancies that are curled around these images and cling, the notion of some infinitely gentle, infinitely suffering thing. Wipe your hand across your mouth and laugh. The worlds revolve like ancient women gathering fuel in vacant lots. Okay, so now we've got another switch. We've got to switch to third person now, and we're back in the afternoon and the early evening. So the poem has a cyclical structure because we end where we began. So we start with this metaphor of the person's soul being stretched tight across the skies that fade behind a city block. I think the metaphor suggests suffering, the person's soul's being stretched. And importantly and symbolically, his soul is hidden behind the city, okay? So if we think like our soul symbolizes meaning or purpose or our identity or spirituality or something like that, all of that's being blocked by the urban environment. And his soul, again, all of those things we just said soul symbolized, is being stretched and trampled by his existence within the city. At 4 and 5 and 6 o'clock, we got polysyndeton there, and it really emphasizes the kind of the passage of time and this kind of relentless passing of time that the person is going through. 4 and 5 and 6 o'clock. We got more synecdoche, short square fingers, the eyes, and it's these fragmented images of people that are populating the early environment. We end this little stanza with the conscience of a blackened street, impatient to assume the world. Again, we've got the personification of the street, so the external environment, and ironically, there's kind of this juxtaposition between the street being blackened but having a conscience. So some irony there, and it's the street that is impatient to assume the world. Again, some irony there, because we would think maybe it should be the people who are impatient to assume their world, but no, it's the street. Then we get a shift to first person, and I find it interesting to think about who it is that's speaking here. Again, you can disagree with me here, but I feel like this is the closest we get to Eliot's voice, maybe, in the poem. But yeah, that's just my interpretation. You can dispute that. But the person, whoever I is moved by fancies that are curled around these images. So all these images that we've just been given, have moved this person. The notion, the idea of some infinitely gentle, infinitely suffering thing. So again, we got Eliot being ambiguous. What is the infinitely gentle, infinitely suffering thing? I think it's humanity, okay? So he's moved by these images of humans who are suffering, and he would like to help them, maybe through poetry. But yeah, again, I want you to think about what you think he's saying here. Yeah, what is the infinitely gentle, infinitely suffering thing? Again, to me, this is like a moment of insight, but then it's immediately contrasted by a shift in tone with this kind of absurd, quite aggressive imperative to wipe your hand across your mouth and laugh. The worlds revolve like ancient women gathering fuel in vacant lots. Again, Eliot loves an ambiguous ending. Loves a simile or a metaphor to end that is hard to interpret. So what does this simile mean? Again, you should be thinking about what you think it means. I think the idea of the worlds revolving is this idea of time continuing to pass, history repeating itself, the days repeating themselves, routine, monotony. And they revolve like ancient women gathering fuel in vacant lots. So again, we think about, what do ancient women usually symbolize? Maybe wisdom, okay, something like that. But what are these women doing? They're gathering fuel in vacant lots. So it's quite a meaningless action, I think. So I think we're ending with an image of things being meaningless, and kind of that your life is just like an ancient woman gathering fuel in vacant lots. It's like a meaningless action. All right, that's the end of our video for today. Again, there's quite a few moments in this poem where I've asked you to think about what you think. So make sure you do that. Write down some questions, write down some ideas, so that you can have a really nice and interesting conversation about preludes with your class. Thank you guys. Bye.